Hello and welcome back to the Bach Cello Suite workshops. I'm Jean-Guihen Queyras. This is I Touch Your Life. I need to start with a little technical warning. I am these days in a beautiful region in Italy. The view I have right now behind this my camera is absolutely stunning. The sea, some islands, everything, and the beauty of it is very inspiring. The weather is great, but the internet connection hasn't been very reliable, as we have been trying today. So I cross my fingers that it will be good enough. I speak a bit slower, and in the worst scenario, if it gets too shaky from the connection, we will have to have another attempt another day, but I hope this will be successful. Today, Sarabande from the Sixth Suite. Well, I know I've been very enthusiastic through all this series about what a jewel each of these 36 movements are. Yet the Sarabande from the Sixth Suite is something special for all of us cellists, even more special. This is a movement which, well, I would say with relatively few notes, delivers such a message of harmony, of beauty, of flow. And I think it is not by chance that some of our greatest artists, cellists like Yo-Yo Ma, have been playing this piece as an encore everywhere around the world, and everywhere whenever the notion of peace was involved or wished for. And yeah, so before we go into this movement, I want to say that I'm very excited that my guest today will be Arthur Nestrovski. And I will take more time to present him when he will join us in about 15 minutes. But amongst his many activities, the one that made it even more meaningful for me that he would be our guest today is that he just released a few months ago as a performer and composer an album called Sarabande. So the idea of the Sarabande has been very central to him in the past months, and we will ask him why. Now, you remember that in the first 5 Sarabandes we have looked at until so far in this series, Bach managed to have each time a different illustration of the Sarabande, a different variation of it. Let's go quickly through it again. The first Sarabande was really, I would say, the best possible Sarabande to really immediately get this very central aspect of it, which is the relationship, the flow between the first and the second beat. Remember? So always the flow from the first to the second. In the second suite, we had a first bar with an extremely active first beat to the second beat, and something that took us to the second bar where there was no second beat. So we had already a different structure. The third Sarabande was rhythmically again more similar to the first one, but the difference was that this time, remember the first suite, we had the melody would immediately move, the soprano voice. And now in the third suite, our soprano stays but the harmony changes on the second beat. And the soprano only gives in and releases on the third beat. The fourth Sarabande in the fourth suite was really all about the flow to the second bar. And the second beats were always resolutions, so there were never heavy beats in this sarabande. So this was the fourth sarabande, I would say, is the one that was, from all the six, is the most apart, the most different one. In the fifth suite, you remember, very special sarabande as well. This time it was all about the dissonance on the second beat. This appoggiatura, very expressive one on the second beat, to express this pool, this substance on the second beat. Well, now what happens in this sixth suite? It's the first time that Bach actually stays on the same note, on the same chord, on the second beat. So we have the sarabande 1, 2, but with no harmonic event. At least in the first bar. Now, what does it tell us? What does it give us? First of all, it already gives, I think, something more serenity, because we are not actively immediately leaving a harmony that we presented on the downbeat. We want to stay there a bit longer. That's the first thing that I see in there. And the other thing is that it will, I think it brings us even more in this, I would say operatic, but I would rather say like a cantata, a cantare aspect, a speaking aspect, because we just repeat. And inevitably, when we repeat a note on an instrument, we have to think that this has to do with the speaking, with that there would be, if it was a cantata, there would be, you know, a consonant or something on this second syllable. So we have to speak them really. So I think that's the first thing that strikes me in this first part. Now we let me come to the what I think is going to be a defining property of this particular sarabande, is that in this flow in 3, it's all going to be about the subdivision of these beats in quarter notes. So they will be, not all the time, but most of the time. And these quarter notes, sometimes they will be a third, a descending third, like we have at the beginning of the second bar. But sometimes, as we will see later, they will be just one step from each other, and just one step down or one step up. And the consequence of that, and I will give you quite a few examples, is that inevitably, almost inevitably, when you have a chord, something like this, one of the notes belongs to the harmony and the other one doesn't. And this will give something very rich and very generous, a very generous quality to this sarabande. Before I play this first half, because I've talked a lot now, look how many chords we have here compared to most of the movements in the 6 suites. So this is really, I would say, almost the Bach goes in the other direction of what he has done in all these suites, which was to relish at the fact that we are not a harmonic instrument. And now he says, okay, let's make of the cello a harmonic instrument. So I play this first half. So yeah, it's at the same time it's simple, but it's generous, and it's generous in its scope, because thanks to the fifth string for which it is composed, it has a large register and so many harmonies. I want to bring your attention to a few more details in this first part before we go on. So first of all, in the first two bars, basically everything is exposed. The notion of the repetition of the note, that will come a lot through the sarabande. And then a note that is calling for the next bar. The descending third, and then we go to a new register. Again, the descending third, you heard. And here for the first time, we have this appoggiature, this late note from the harmony before, and the descending third. And then from here we will rise with the modulation. And we reach the highest register with a very generous chord. And now we have this again, the middle voice is the one that does these little steps. And now let's look at this this penultimate bar, second to last bar, because it's going to be all about these quarter notes. So what does he do? Dissonance, resolution, dissonance, resolution, and then when we have the third, these two notes are part of the harmony, no problem. Dissonance and the resolution. Yeah. And when I say dissonance, it's a way of expressivity, basically. Something that I said already in these workshops, but I want to say again. What I love about these notes that are not part of the harmony and that are appoggiatura in Italian. Well, the English call it leaning note, and I think this is such a beautiful name for them, because you want to lean on them because of their dissonant quality. The second half starts again with the soprano that stays, but this time the bass moves. Now we have our descending third and the modulation. The middle voice makes a comment. Now the middle voice does this third, and then the soprano makes the comment. Again the third. The appoggiatura. And then Bach puts in our ear this beautiful, fragile high note. And then he enriches this note that was exposed by itself with harmony underneath, but ornamented harmony. And then we meet again this note that we had left there. And this is a way for Bach to give us a longer phrase. So I play again the whole thing. Now again, he does what he did in the first half, and which I find very compelling, which is to give us a very expressive upper register sentence or question, or and to give a sort of answer and conclusion to the lower voice. Let me take the time to play again the last 4 bars of the first half. We went very high, but the conclusion was left to the middle voice. Now it's the same thing here. Remember, we went very high. And then the middle voice. Which, by the way, this was an absolute perfect example of a harmony, an anticipation note, harmony, anticipation note, and then appoggiatura, double appoggiatura with the third, and then the resolution. Now we come to a passage where it will be only a flow of quarter notes, 2 by 2, and Bach does something magical. I find there is that by going down these thirds, you know, remember, which is one of our main motives in this suite, this descending third. Well, he's going to go just descending third, and by doing so, he will imply the harmony changes. We don't even realize it. We started on a G major, and then the E is introduced, the C sharp. So we finish actually on this A major septime chord, and then D major. We are in G. And now G. Did you hear how the bass goes down? But the G is still up there. Now our middle voices are going to make a chorale. You hear how it's getting richer and richer. Huh? He's really rejoicing at the fullness of this harmony. Now again, going down in thirds. Introducing a minor, minore. The last modulation to B minor. An exception in the whole of this Sarabande, some fast notes that after all these rich harmonies and chords give a feeling of freedom, I would say. One very last tiny modulation to the subdominant. Now these last 3 bars are really very, very special, because by the means of what we have been speaking about the whole time, we have always one of these 2 notes in the beat which is totally in dissonance, but we still have the G down there virtually. And the next downbeat he does play this. The E resolves, so we release a tension, a dissonance, but this resolution creates a new dissonance between the 2 upper voices. The 7th down there, again a dissonance, and then the upper voice resolve, and then we have this very special anticipation of the last note, and again. So there is this maelstrom of notes which are part of the harmony, and when one voice is resolving, the other voice is quitting, and so, which gives this very rich material. And I was thinking, now this, I'm going to say again something very subjective, but you've been very tolerant with me in all these 34 episodes so far, with me expressing my interpretation of what I hear and what I see in these suites. And here, for me, Bach manages to create notes that are not part of the harmony and make them at least as beautiful as the notes that are part of the harmony, or to put it even stronger, I think he makes them an essential part of the music. And is this not about tolerance? About how, you know, a dissonant note in German, they have a friend for this, Fremdnote, strange note, a note that doesn't belong there, you know. And it's amazing how many of these Bach puts, and maybe that's what also gives this Sarabande this feeling of harmony, of belonging together. Now is the moment where our dear friend Arthur Nestrovski will join us and share with us his passion for the Sarabande and for Sarabande in general. Dear Arthur, are you there? Can you
yes.
hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see me and hear me?
I can see. Yes. We can see you. We can hear you. Wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time, dear Arthur, to be with us tonight.
This is a great pleasure, but it's really not fair to have to speak after this.
No,
we all hear you play the Sarabande, and now I have to come here and spoil it. But it is a great...
Definitely not. Let me just say to our friends why I'm so grateful you took that, because you have so many, like a painter, you have so many colors on your plate. You are, that's how I met you, the artistic director of the wonderful Orchestra de Estado de São Paulo in Brazil. You are a composer, you are a fantastic guitar player, you have studied literature and. So you are quite a busy man, so I'm very happy we have you tonight. Now, before we actually, let's start with this. I have many questions for you, but one of the things when we were preparing for this, you told me why you found this particular Sarabande so special and so general. So why don't we just go on with this, and then we'll go to the more general idea of the Sarabande.
Sure. Well, if I may, because you've already said so many things, I was going to mention some of the same ones. There are one or two points that I'd like to stress about the analysis you made. But before that, you mentioned harmony and tolerance. And I think it's a good idea that we try to imagine for ourselves the world Bach was living in. Now, picture this. Imagine a world where thousands, hundreds of thousands of people are dying of a contagious disease. Imagine a world with a lot of poverty and hunger. A world with wars. Well, there are always wars. A world with a lot of political instability within his particular region, but also among different regions and among different countries. A world of ecological disaster. I mean, the culture of caring for nature is disappearing, and economic interests are forcing deforestation. and the use of wood as an economic factor, but the extinction of natural forests. A world with a lot of superstition and very conservative religious feelings, fights among religion factions, and a strong anti-enlightenment, anti-scientific current of thought. Now, this looks a lot like our world, doesn't it? I mean, I could be talking about 2021. And I'm talking about 17th century Thuringia. This is the world Bach was living in. Strange. I mean, I mentioned Thuringia because, again, it's important that we realize we all talk about Bach as a German composer, of course. But he probably never thought of himself as a German composer because Germany was not even a strong concept. I mean, he was much more a man of Thuringia in Saxony or Saxonia than a man of Germany. I mean, the province itself was a much stronger concept. And the idea of a unified country was still far away. So this is a man living in a particular region of Germany which sort of imposed on itself provinciality. It sort of refused to accompany the development of the Enlightenment ideals in scientific thinking. Newton was born in 1643. Bach is 1685, of course. Bach is a contemporary of Newton. Newton was born one year after Galileo's death. So we're talking about the development of modern science. And still, in Thuringia, where he lived, Eisenach, and in Köthen, and then Leipzig, and in Saxonia, of course, these ideas had no interest and no influence. You could mention he lived in the age of enlightenment. You could mention he lived in the age of religion, because that was his world. In the world where the presence of death was tremendous. And people died of the plague. I mean, they called it the plague. We could say coronavirus. I mean, it's the same thing. And people were just dying because they had no remedy whatsoever. And they were reeling from the 30-year war. The war ended in 1648. But still, 40 years later, if you have an idea, that region of the world, Thuringia, lost half of its population during that period, mid-17th century. During the 30-year war, the calculations vary, between 5 and 8 million people were killed. So it's hard to imagine. And you add to that the plague, contagious diseases, which to a certain extent were a consequence of the war. And they killed life expectancy was 30 years old. You and I would be long gone. So this is the world of Bach. You know, when we listen to music like this, of course, I mean, and you listen to the music of Bach, and you imagine somehow an idyllic little place in the middle of Germany, you know, with beautiful landscape. Well, true to a certain extent, but it was a world of extreme suffering, difficulty, disease, death. He lost many children, as you know, I think 10 or 11. I mean, you read his chronology, and the babies are born and they die a year later, or 2 days later, or 3 years later. His first wife died when she was 35, as you all know, and he came back home and she had already been buried. And that's when he wrote the Chaconne for violin solo. So it's a world of great suffering, of death all around, of pain, and still he is writing this music. And he's writing this music as a kind of encyclopedia of musical knowledge up to that point. He is a kind of self-appointed guardian of the tradition of polyphonic music. to an extraordinary extent, which was not recognized, of course, by his immediate contemporaries. When he was hired in Leipzig, as Kapellmeister or as cantor, they said, well, they couldn't find anybody who could teach Latin as well as music. So, okay, let's have this Johann Sebastian, because we couldn't find anybody better. Because what they really wanted was somebody who could teach Latin in the schools and also music. Well, bad luck, we couldn't find anybody. So, okay, let's go ahead with him. They had no idea. And this is, with even Leipzig, I mean, it's a very small town, provincial town, and he's writing the B minor Mass and the St. Matthew Passion. Now, these, it's just unbelievable. But the circumstances are very different from what you would expect. I mean, you have to think that he's writing this music in a world which is a difficult world. Enormous, personal losses all around. The cello suites, of course, you must have, I mean, I'm coming in late in this series, of course, I'm the 34th. I'm sure you must have mentioned all of these things. But of course, he wrote this in Kärnten between 1717 and 1723. Nobody knows exactly why he did that, probably for a cello player that was his colleague there, as we all know. There are no antecedents. I think there's only one Italian composer, a Domenico Gabrieli, who wrote pieces for solo cello, because nobody was writing for a solo cello. So it's quite extraordinary. Then he goes ahead and he writes not a single piece, but he writes 6 absolutely extraordinary suites for cello, which, by the way, again, I'm sure you must have mentioned that, until 1939, if I'm not wrong, when Casals recorded them, they were barely known at all. Nobody played them, or barely.
Right.
So it's good to remember that this music has only become what it has become in the past 60 or 70 years. It's very recent. It's really our music. In Bach's time, it was probably never played in a concert, I'm sure. Nobody ever sat there and played this music. And even until 1940 something, 1950, people were not playing it yet. It's quite extraordinary, because now we all see that this is one of the major achievements of Western civilization, to say the least. And this Sarabande, as you said, is very special among the Sarabandes. Casals used to say, again, I'm quoting by memory, but he used to say that Bach is, no, the cello suites are the very essence of Bach's music. And Bach is the very essence of music. The cello suites are the very essence of Bach, and Bach is the very essence of music.
That's beautiful.
And I would go it's beautiful. And I would go one step further, and I would say, this Sarabande is the very essence of the suites, and the suites are the essence of Bach, and Bach is the essence of music. So we're really, I mean, we are as deep as we can be into the heart of music. And the way it happens is so extraordinary. I mean, you mentioned a few of the harmonic features. One thing you didn't say is the extraordinary form. Because, the Sarabandes, we can talk about Sarabandes as a genre later, but the Sarabandes very often have 8 measures and then either 12 or 16. I mean, usually the second half is longer than the first half. But here we have something else. We have 8 bars and then 24. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. It's a short first part, and then a very long second one, longer than any of the others. And they are very dissimilar. And my feeling, I mean, this is completely subjective, right? This is just, I'm sort of daydreaming here or brainstorming. My feeling is that once he gets into those descending lines, which you described and played so beautifully. He just can't let go of it. It's just too beautiful, and he just wants more of it and more of it. And he just goes on again and again. And they actually come, as you pointed out, they are sort of hidden in the very beginning. It's already there. Actually, what you have behind this figure is simply F, E, D. It's already there, the descending line. The appoggiatura, as you so well pointed out. Then you have the descending line, but with a dissonance. And from these two little cells, these two elements, very much in a way that we've been used to listening and to finding in Beethoven's music much later. From these two little elements, he builds everything else. And the dissonant notes, the leaning notes, as you described, become the element of expressiveness, of pain, of suffering. And the descending lines are just like, the light of God. And it's just so extraordinarily beautiful. And it's just coming down and again, with one crucial difference, which is almost at the very end, when you have this descending figure, it's just a D major chord, and then, quite extraordinary for Bach, you have the D minor chord right afterwards. This is not common. It's common for us. It's common for our ears, but it's not common in a Baroque piece to just have major minor like this. It's much more an expressive version of the previous chord than a modulation to the minor. It's like a dark version of the chord that went before. And finally, we come to those two last measures, which you pointed out are really, it's like a maelstrom, as you said. And this, if you just showed these two measures at a counterpoint class, this is as crazy as it can be. Because if you don't see what's coming before, you just have a major seventh on the strong beat.
Yeah.
And then the second beat, you have a seventh, and at the same time in appoggiatura, going from the fourth to the third degree. And then you have another dissonance, to make it worse, an augmented fourth, a tritone. And finally, you resolve this, but you resolve this with a major seventh, finally arriving at the D major chord. So this is like a concentration of everything that went on before, and if I may put it somewhat in a grand style, you go from chaos to order. Or if you wish, you go from extreme suffering and pain to calm, to a resolution, to a peaceful and serene and wise resolution. So, this, to be able to speak about a piece of music in such terms without, I hope, sounding ridiculous, I think it's an evidence of the strength of this music for us today, and the extraordinary character of this particular Sarabande, even in the august context of the six suites. Well, I could go on and on, but just ask me something else. Yes.
Yeah. No, it's just I unfortunately I would listen to you for hours. It's so wonderful, this passion that you have. And by the way, I will mention you told me before that you had prepared a transcription of this Sarabande for the guitar, and that you will post it soon on your social media. So I would really encourage everyone watching to go and listen to that. I look very much forward to that. Unfortunately, this is ridiculous, but we have only a very few minutes left, and I would love to ask you about your album called Sarabande that you did with your daughter Livia. Can you tell us a bit about it?
I'll tell you about that. Well, it's called Sarabande. It's out in all the platforms. It's an album of songs. I am the proud and happy father of this really superb singer. I can say that because
Magnificent.
you've heard it. Yeah, to a large extent, I'm now Livia's father. This is my accomplishment. She's a superb young Brazilian singer, and this is our second album together. It's an album of songs. I wrote lyrics. I wrote Portuguese translations for several songs by Schumann and Schubert. I've been doing this for many years, and some of them are here, played on the guitar. I'm not changing notes. I'm not playing this in Brazilian rhythm. It's what's written, but it's sung like a Brazilian song. And I took the liberty of writing lyrics, free lyrics, to a Bach Sarabande. It's actually, for you, it's the fifth cello suite. For me, it's the second lute suite. But it's the Sarabande of the fifth cello suite. And I wrote lyrics for it. There are two things behind it. One, we have in Brazilian music, in what we call Brazilian popular music, we have a very, very rich tradition of extraordinary poetry sung to melodies and rhythms and harmonies. I mean, it's sung poetry. It's very strong in Brazil, especially in the second half of the 20th century. So it's natural to do an album where I do my own songs and some Brazilian classics next to Schumann or Schubert. It doesn't sound crazy. They sort of talk to one another. It's the same kind of relation between poetry and music. And in this Sarabande's case, I didn't write this anywhere, but the Sarabande originally was a sung dance. The genre was created in Spain or Latin America. I mean, there are evidences in the mid-16th century, the first evidence of a Sarabande. And it was a dance, as we know, but it was a sung dance. And then gradually it developed into two different kinds of Sarabande, a faster one in Italy and Spain and England, and a slower, grave one, as we've just heard, as in Germany and France. And also it lost the lyrics, and it became an instrumental piece, and even an orchestral piece, as you have in Lully or Rameau. But originally the Sarabande was a sung dance. So in this context of songs by Schumann, by Schubert, and by Brazilian composers, to create lyrics for a Bach Sarabande is a bit less crazy than it might sound. And so there it is. The album was released last year, and it's out. You can hear it. I also released last year only digital, and another, actually a single, 2 tracks only, which is called Sarabandas in the plural, and that's just 2 Bach Sarabandes played on the classical guitar. I'm just classical music, nothing. It's not songs, sorry. So both are available. And as you said, I mean, you got me studying this Sarabande. I didn't write anything. I'm just reading from the cello score. But it's natural to add at least the bass notes where they're not written here, because you can't do them on the cello, but you can on the guitar. You can actually sustain the bass. And I'd like to mention one example for you to try, because it's quite extraordinary. You have the score there. When you begin with those descending figures, right, measure 17, you did mention that it goes into A major, right?
Yes.
The measure 18. But it goes into A major with the G must remain at the bottom. In the previous measure, you have a G as a bass, right? Measure 17.
Right, yeah.
Well, this G continues there, so it's actually the third inversion of a seventh chord.
Right.
Now, that must be so because the next measure, the bass is an F sharp.
Yeah.
So it's actually a sustained G and then an F sharp, and we're back into D. But here comes the extraordinary thing. The next measure, this F sharp bass must remain.
Yes.
And it clashes with the G. And then it resolves in F sharp. So again, you have actually a minor ninth resolving
right.
into the F sharp. You can try that.
And
Even on the cello, you can try it just to see what it sounds like. It's quite extraordinary. And it's one more example of extreme dissonance that resolves in the proper chord.
yeah,
And
wonderful.
this is imaginary because you're not playing it on the cello, you have to imagine it. But on the guitar I can do it. So get ready for it. And I
Yes.
will, at some point in the next few days, I will play this. So I'll post a music video so you can all hear it.
With the extra bass note, fantastic! It will be a great school for all of
Yes.
us. Thank you so much, dear Arthur. It was wonderful to hear your passion about this music, this piece in particular, and Bach in general. And yes, dear friends, next time we will talk about the gavottes, and Piotr Anderszewski, the wonderful pianist, a dear friend, will be my guest. To be honest, I know it's not going to be next week, and I'm not yet sure whether it's going to be in 2 weeks, but I will, of course, keep you informed. I hope as soon as possible. Stay healthy, everybody. Dear Arthur, all best wishes to Sao Paulo, and wonderful to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.